Music City Social is produced by Star Maker PR Group, providing publicity and public relations services to the entertainment industry. Learn more at starmakerpr.com.
My guest today is musician, actor, entertainer, and comedian Gary Jenkins. Gary's career began in the mid-'80s as a performer at Freedomland Amusement Park in Memphis, Tennessee. In the late 80s, Gary moved to Nashville and attended Belmont College. He also secured an internship at a music publishing company on Music Row. To earn money, Gary did a solo act as a guitar vocalist in many of Nashville's downtown nightclubs. Eventually, Gary auditioned and secured work at Opryland USA's theme park. There, he sang, played guitar, and produced two of the most popular rock and roll shows in the park. Gary worked as a producer for Opryland USA until 1997 when the park closed. Since that time, he's performed his music and comedy routine for hundreds of corporations around the globe. One of the things that has kept Gary's career moving is diversity. In addition to music, Gary acts in TV commercials, writes and performs comedy, and more recently is securing acting roles in movies. In the early 2000s, Gary was given an oversized Elvis costume. As a joke, Gary stuffed it full of pillows and by accident created his now popular fictional character, Fat Elvis. Gary continues to perform music, act in movies, do stand-up comedy, and showcase his Fat Elvis routine for corporations around the globe. Anyone who knows Gary Jenkins will tell you this: you cannot be in the same room with him without eventually buckling over with laughter. He is truly one of the funniest people I know. It is great to have you. I am not going to tell people what my guest is doing right now, but it's funny, which we'll get into that in a little bit.
Smelling the marker.
Gary is one of the best people you can possibly work for. And I know because I did hundreds of gigs with Gary. So Gary, okay, let's talk about you and not me. You grew up in North Alabama.
Yes, I did, Drew.
And that's not far from Music City. So tell us about, what were your musical influences and what was it like living there?
Now, when you say Music City, you are referring to Nashville, Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
See, man, you got to realize I grew up in Florence, Alabama, across the river from Muscle Shoals, and then, about, I don't know, 2.5, 3 hours from Memphis, and then 2.5 hours from Nashville. So all of those, I don't know why someone hasn't come up with some clever music triangle thing. All of those things were, we were real aware of growing up there. I mean, because we didn't go far on vacations very, very often, but we would go to Memphis or Nashville, and of course the Redneck Riviera, which would be northern Florida. And that's about the extent of it. But man, it was really something to be around all of those, what was going on in Muscle Shoals, and then to come to Nashville and to go to Memphis and be outside of Elvis's house and Charlie Rich, and there was a lot going on. My mom's twin brother Bill was a songwriter, and he had a garage behind his house filled with there was a studio, and Donnie Fritz, who's a famous songwriter, and call him Funky Donnie Fritz. He played with Chris Christopherson. He was around, and all that stuff was around. But man, I was just a little kid. And I was fascinated with music, and I remember when I was a little kid, that songwriter uncle, rented a piano, and they thought my brother would be the one that would be more interested in music, but actually it was me plunking around on a little more than him. But,
wow.
But it was neat. Rolling Stones recorded in our town, and I went to school with the sons of all those famous musicians, the guys that were in the Muscle Shoals sound. Pat Hood, who's now Patterson Hood with the Drive-By Truckers, was a schoolmate of mine. Sure. And Jay Johnson, whose dad Jimmy Johnson was the guitar player in the Muscle Shoals sound. David Hood, Pat's dad, was the bass player, Muscle Shoals sound. It's just boring. You're looking bored, man.
No. I was just catching a little rest.
But it was a great town.
That's
a lot of music around.
Since you grew up there, sometimes when you live in the forest, you don't see the trees. But
totally, man.
Were you aware of it?
Man, I think when I look back on it, what I was aware of was that and this is kind of probably one of those socioeconomic things, but in my mom and my dad's eyes, playing music and doing something like that was something that we really admired. You know what I mean? Like that was a cool thing to do, and there was nothing cooler than to do that. I think if you are, you know, a kid whose family is a member of the country club, they're probably not thinking that. But I just remember that everyone loved music. My mom and dad loved music, and my mom was more of a she liked more like 50s rock and stuff like that, and my dad was more of a country guy. But they loved music, and like when Elvis would come on TV, man, everything would stop, and we just, you know. So that was the biggest thing. As far as being involved in any of that, I wasn't really, because I was just a kid. When I got to school, I was going to go into real estate, you know. I started playing guitar when I was in 3rd grade, playing ukulele, kind of laid it aside, picked it up again, and then played in little rock bands, and then when I got to UNA down there, University of North Alabama, I got involved in this show they had. It was a production show where we would play for the incoming freshmen, and it was a big change in my life, because I had been around where I grew up, man. If you played in the band or sang in the choir, you might as well wear a dress to school, which I did. No, I didn't. So I played football and wrestled through high school, and I wanted to be involved in some of the music stuff, but I never did, because I was just afraid of, like, you know,
getting beat up,
or having a slushy thrown in my face. Yeah. You know, but so anyway, man, when I was down there, probably the only real thing that happened as far as when I was down there playing, I became friends with Mark Hall, and his dad was Rick Hall, that has Fame Studios, and I wrote a song down there. I was getting to open for some of the people coming through, like David Brenner and the Romantics, and I'd do my guitar vocal thing where I'd do impersonations and original songs and interact with the audience. And I wrote a song about a little girl who was a friend of mine that passed away, and it got all this recognition, and I went into the studio there and recorded
at
the
Fame
song.
Studios.
Yeah, and
wow.
And then they packaged the song and sold it and raised a lot of money on this girl's behalf. When I was there, Mark's dad, Rick, checked out what I was doing, and you know, I guess to see if I had some type of potential as an artist. But looking back on it, man, I was really I was just I wasn't anywhere near where, you know, my writing was very immature and all. And I don't know. I basically, man, I started learning songs. What was weird about the way I learned how to play music is, as soon as I started playing ukulele, like in 3rd grade, I don't know if you know this about me, but I started memorizing songs, and I still have the book. I memorized songs from the beginning to the end so that I could play them by myself. And I've met a lot of other musicians. I don't think a lot of people did that. Yeah. But my whole little fantasy was being, you know, put in a spot where I wanted to be able to deliver that song. So
are there any guitar players in the audience? Exactly.
And that was my fear. I was so embarrassed, you know, that I was terrified. I think I was really shy, and I fantasized about that situation where I would be asked to sit in, and would I, you know, be able to deliver under the pressure, kind of like the kid, you know, with the basketball, you know, when the clock's ticking out. Sure. Will you be able to? So anyway, I just started memorizing songs. By the time I was in college, I mean, I knew hundreds of cover tunes, and I could play and take a little. I had been in bands, but these bands would always break up and stuff, and so I got a little PA where I could go and play and sing, and basically any artist back then you'd name, I could do a few of their songs. And man, it was a blessing when John Mellencamp came out, because I could sing like it. Yeah. And I had good hair back then, and I had
you still do.
Oh, thank you. Your hair is beautiful. Also, edit. We're back. Anyway, I'm kidding. But so anyway, man, I'd go and play all those old cover tunes, and I just started. I got in my head, it's like, man, I want to do this, and I didn't think I'd ever have anything. And but I wanted to do it, and I was having a ball, and it kind of gave me a little identity, and I was like, I want to do this, and so that's what I started doing.
That's cool. Yeah, so when did you actually move to Nashville?
Well, I'll tell you, man, I auditioned for this theme park in Memphis called Liberty Land, and I didn't get it the first year. I thought I was going to get it, but they hired me the next year. And they told me the reason they didn't hire me the first year was because they thought I was on something. Because I was so excited, man. When I went up there, I was all coffeeed up, and when I saw that they were probably going to hire me that first year, I was just excited, man. I mean, I couldn't have been more excited because I'd grown up working construction, doing all this manual labor, and I thought, man, I'm going to get to live here. Well, they didn't hire me. I was heartbroken, but the next year they did, and that was the summer of '85, and I worked at Liberty Land singing in their 50s rock show.
Wow.
Had a ball, man. And I've always said this, no offense to anyone else in my life, but man, that was a fun summer. You know, I mean, I was just living the dream, man. I was commuting back and forth from Florence there in the spring, and then once the summer started, we'd do those shows, and I loved it. I worked with John and Joseph Anderson and Brady Spencer, whose wife Lisa is the Channel 4 weather girl here.
Yeah.
And John and Joseph Anderson are still close friends of mine, and a guy named John Walker. We all were in the band together. And then that fall, check this out, John Anderson, who's like a mentor to me and been a mentor to Andy Childs too, who's a little ahead of me, I think a couple years older than me. But John got a USO tour that fall to Europe, all over Iceland and Germany and Belgium and all these places. And they didn't need me in the band, but John liked me, and I think he knew what a thrill it would be for me. And so I took off a semester from school and went all over Europe with them. And man, I was on cloud 9.
I bet.
Oh my gosh, man. 20 years old in Amsterdam and Germany. We had a ball, man. We just burned the candle at both ends. I mean, we all came home sick with no voices. And man, I got back, and then I had like 3 or 4 different people tell me. I remember when we were over there in Europe, John was like, we were on all these army bases, and John was like, man, you're going to wind up over here. Let something happen. He goes, you'll be over here with these guys. I'm like, I know, I don't want to be, you know, nothing against those guys, but I was terrified. We were right across from Russia at some place in Iceland there. I mean, like, anyway, I just decided, man, I'm going back to school. I want to be in the music business, but I want to be the smartest way, and everybody... I had 3 different people spontaneously tell me about Belmont. So I checked out Memphis State, and the school I was going to, I had a music program, but I went to Belmont. That's what brought me to Nashville, and it was great. And I know you sometimes ask people in these other things what they should do, but man, by coming to Belmont, I didn't want to live in the dorm. I have to say it was one of the greatest experiences. I met all these people. I immediately had a reason to be here. My bills were, I wasn't like in an apartment by myself, right. And so I was living in a dorm at Belmont, and immediately went from not knowing anything up here to getting an internship and working at a publishing company down on Music Row, and for Rick Sanchek and another guy, I'll think of his name in a second, Ron Cornelius. And so, man, I was down there. Suddenly, I was in the music business, and I was going to school, having a ball. Broke, I could afford 1 Big Mac a week. That was my splurge. I used to go down there and get it. Back then, man, Lower Broad was just Skid Row, a scary place to go.
It sure was. Late 80s. When I moved here, it was very undesirable.
Oh, yeah, man. It was a different town, and everything was different. They had a studio there you could have access to, and I got involved there, and for like a year, it was really a year or so before I started playing out, but I just was hanging around there. I could have gone back to Memphis and worked again, which I can't believe I didn't, but I didn't. I stayed, and I wanted to finish school, and I eventually started playing doing my acoustic solo thing all around, and got involved in some productions there, and I was on a couple of recording things that came out of Belmont there, and so, man, I started playing around here, and then eventually I kept auditioning for Opryland, got that gig at Opryland, man.
And that's when I met you. 1992, I auditioned and got that gig. So that's how you wound up there. You were just auditioning. And
man, auditioned for 5 years for that park. And back then, to get a gig at I only wanted to be in one thing, and that was the 50s rock and roll show. Not a Broadway guy. But man, that's what I wanted to do. And as a kid, we'd come up and seen the Jukebox Theater and 50s stuff, and I just loved that era of music. I loved the Stray Cats. I watched Happy Days. I loved all those old records my mom had, and so, man, I kept auditioning, but I was working, and I was actually making, I was making like $350 to $700 a night playing those bars around Vanderbilt and Frats and stuff.
That's a good tip for
I gotta
someone hearing this program.
That would be good money now, really good money to play locally.
It sure is.
But anyway, my dad was like, man, I wouldn't even go out there and audition anymore. It's one of those things too. It's like by the time that I didn't really need the gig is when I got the gig, and they hired me. And it was clear that they were hiring me. Like, man, not sure about you, but we're going to hire you. Dwayne Probst and Porter Howe, who ended up being Little Texas, they were schoolmates of mine. I think they put in a word for me. But I got a job there in '87. I was in the Blue Cast, which was a summer cast, and I got put in there with a really great girl singer, Kim Keys, and that helped a lot because she was kind of a star out there.
Amazing singer.
Yeah, and we started doing that show. Everything was too high for me, man. It was like a 30-minute aerobics contest, and it was a nightmare because the show, everything was super high for me, but I gutted it out, and I had to really be healthy because it was so taxing physically, even at 21, to be doing that. But I tell you what happened, and is that the next year they hired Brenda Lee's road band, and the deal was Brenda Lee said, they hired Brenda Lee, and Brenda Lee was going to be in this theater out there, the Acuff Theater, and she said, I'll do your show, but you got to employ my road band, the guys that play with me. So they said, fine. So what they did is they fired everyone in a couple of the smaller shows. So they fired all of our band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so all of our band. So anyway, I went to the office and asked them and Kim put in a good word for me, if I could be the show leader. And they said yes. And this allowed me, because the focus from the office was on mainly the bigger shows, I was able to put the show together. So that second year we were out there, man,
what year was that?
That was '87, and I was able to write the show that where everything was in my keys and doing things that made me look good and made Kim look good. Was that
the Jukebox Theater?
Jukebox Theater. Yeah. We were in there for 3 years. '87, '88, '89, and that show was a huge success, and it was thrilling. I got to, what was interesting, I was 23, I guess, or 22, and I had that responsibility, which might not seem like a big deal now, but man, it was a big deal. I mean,
sure.
And suddenly Brenda Lee's band, these guys were all, man, like Danny Rhodes, and who was a big blues guy around town. He passed away not too long ago, a few years ago, and David on piano, I can't think of his last name at this second, and then Vince D on drums. Bob Fortner came in on bass, who ended up being a real mentor and still a dear friend of mine. But man, the thing is, it was like, I always tell people, it was like one of those old Vietnam movies where like these guys are grizzled, have been in the field, and I'm the new guy from West Point who comes in there and doesn't know anything. But I'll tell you, man, the first thing I did when I went in there is the first day of rehearsal, I was completely intimidated and terrified. Because frankly, man, I didn't read music, I was just, winging it on these solo things. I went in there the first day and I said, man, I'm just so thankful y'all are here. And I said, please help me hide the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. And I let them know that I respected them. And man, they immediately were all so cool to me. And man, that was really a big deal in my life, because it allowed me to create a show where I could do the things that made me look and sound good. And one of the things that we kind of discovered the year before was that I had been successful, interacting with the audience, and so that we kind of developed this show. And of course, Kim was real funny, and she could do certain impersonations that were just hilarious, and we really fed off each other well, and it was a successful show, and we did it another year, and then I got tired of doing it, man.
Wow. Now, the park closed in 1997?
I think it's 97, yeah.
Okay, so you were at Opryland for 10 years.
No. Man, I was there 87, 88, 89, and then I left for a couple years, and then when they built that Geo Theater, Gene Whitaker and Joe Geralds and Henry Smiley and some of them called me, and this is kind of funny because I had gone on and started doing these school shows. I ended up doing 900 school shows. But we were doing corporate events too. We had figured out, and thanks to Bob and the people at the park there, that they were putting us in the hotel over there to play at corporate events. And then we realized, man, if we made a promo tape and marketed ourselves, that we could get more money. So we were you know, chugging along, putting money back into PA and vehicles to transport things and learning new stuff and costumes, stuff like that, or clothing that looked cool to wear. Anyway, man, we were doing that and self-sufficient. And Jean Whitaker, I remember her saying when they built that new Geo Theater, she said, we want to hire people that don't need us, which is an interesting thing I always try to remember. You know, if I had stayed there and like just, you know, they may not have valued me as much, but they valued me because, you know, we were doing this other thing. So, man, I went back. They were going to let us sell product there. Tim Watson, who's a great entertainer, was doing really well selling product and other people. So anyway, we created product and we went back and the huge Geo Theater, which is a totally different deal, 3,500
That's where the concerts were held at the park. I mean, it was
beautiful.
And we were doing
venue.
3 shows a day there.
Yeah.
In 100-degree weather.
Brother, I'm going to tell you something.
Oh my gosh.
Before you were there, in 87, 88, and 89, we were in direct sunlight doing 7 shows a day. I remember
that,
man.
In the jukebox. That was...
Don't get me wrong, man. It was hot. We had the difference with us when you were there is we had a lot of lighting on the stage, but and it was hard to get a breeze through there. But I got to tell you, man, it was a harder show in some way because, you know, the venue was not as intimate. The jukebox was intimate, and people were right up there on you, almost like a comedy club, just packed in there. Problem with a 3,500 seat venue, an outdoor venue that was that large, and we went from having a 6 or 7 piece band to having a 10 piece band, trying to fill that stage, and then people coming in there, and it's just human nature. People will sit as far apart as they possibly can.
Well, and the first row of chairs is 20 feet from the
20
stage.
feet, man.
And like you said, audience participation was a big part, of your show. So what was that transition like?
It was a learning experience. I'm going to tell you something to this day. I don't care where you are, even if you just, because I've played, you know, tiny venues and huge venues, but man, and I know Jay Leno said this when he was first doing the Tonight Show, he had them redo the theater after a while so it could be more intimate. If you watch the Tonight Show now, when the show starts, all these people get up and come down to where he is, but it was very difficult to work that room because, number one, there's no control of the seating. People, like I say, you know, I do the same thing. If you walk in there with your person you're with or whatever, you're going to sit 20 rows back and on your own huge, you know, bench there or whatever. So, man, we just had to, we had to adjust, and it's always weird. It's like any conversation. You're so far away from people. It'd be like you and me having this conversation, but being 50 feet away. But we worked on it, man, and Tabitha Fair singing the show. We had a horn section, a bunch of good people.
Who was your drummer?
Man, Drew, were you there in 92?
I was there 92, 93.
Okay. So I remember somebody told me about you, and remember this, we met at Logan's Roadhouse and down by Hickory, and you were an hour late.
You say I was an hour late, but
for the meeting, man.
What you don't know is that I was probably overdrawn. I was probably overdrawn in my checkbook, $300. Needed that work more than you know. Yeah. I think we just got confused on times because,
you know, man, what's so
I'm
funny?
Serious. I needed that job.
Well, what's so funny is, like, you know, you look back on your life and you think, because I know that me and you working together, you know, man, all the different people we've met, you know, throughout, you know, just being involved together. But it was so funny because I knew at that point we were busy. We were working a lot, and I knew I had a good gig and something that was something, you know, to offer. You know, it's all relative, but it was a real paying gig, steady gig. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, where is this guy? And honestly, man, by the time you got there, I was pretty frustrated, and I was really like going, man, I don't, you know, I was just like, I mean, nice to meet you, but
yeah, you were nice. You were actually very nice.
But I was gonna say nice to meet you and leave.
Wow,
but man, you know, in hindsight, it might have been better for everyone.
I don't know. I'm telling the truth when I say it was that job or move back to Denver. I mean, it was such a critical point. Yeah. It was not intentional.
Oh,
I can promise you that. So
I'm giving you a hard time, man. But it is funny when you look back on life and you hear stories like that. Like the big Toby Keith story where he was like leaving town, stops to eat at this restaurant, the Stockyard, I believe, and hands this tape to this lady. A tape is a plastic case. Anyway. But, you know, isn't it funny how little things like that? I mean, just like the last time that I went and auditioned there, you just don't know, like, those little choices, how they might affect your life.
You're right. Yeah. But it's always people.
Yeah.
It's always people that make a change.
But, you know, man, you were there in 92 and 93, 94?
92, 93. We opened the park. That was the first year you'd done the Geo Theater. And you're right. It was an intimidating room for someone like me that had been playing.
To that.
Yeah, because we'd end our 3 shows sweating to death, which, by the way, back then I weighed 35 pounds less because of the heat and the sun and the lights. Man. But we'd end our show at 3 o'clock, and then Diamond Rio would be there 4 hours later, same stage.
Right.
So, yeah, it was fun.
It was awesome. And
it felt like we were doing concerts. That's what was cool about it.
I know. And the funny thing about that venue, if you looked at the venue, and I can't believe I thought when they got rid of the park, they'd keep that venue because it was nice. But, man, I have to say it was an honor, and those people at Opryland were great, and that whole deal with what was going on there, being like a farm league for young entertainers. What kills me about it, just quick aside here, and this is something Jim Dittenhafer said, but back there in that era, we had a TV network that was worldwide. I mean, when we went to Switzerland, I turned on the TV network, there's TNN. We had that theme park.
TNN is coming back on the air. Did you know that?
No.
Yes, it sure is.
But
you heard it here first.
That's awesome. You know, what's amazing though is what they could have done. All this reality TV with like American Idol and all that. They were doing this amazing audition tour where they went over, and I mean, it was like you know, it was like that Broadway show Chorus Line where all these kids are coming from Middle America and everywhere. You know, you dance audition, singing audition, and what they could have done, man, which would have been so brilliant, would have been to film those auditions and then film those kids coming to Nashville and getting involved in these shows. And then they could have taken, check this out, the Acuff Rose Publishing that Gaylord owned, and let those kids cut songs. They could have showcased them on that TV network and built careers and built fan bases, you know, for those people. It was really a drama. There were all these talented, attractive people. I tell you, man, being over there where we were, if you just came into work and left, there wasn't as it was more of a family atmosphere at Liberty Land. But what went on those bigger shows, you know, was pretty amazing, because you just had these super talented, attractive people. These kids that were like, I mean, every, you know, Miss Mississippi, Miss, you know, whatever. I mean, they were like, and these talented singers and dancers, and you know, a lot of them went on to Broadway. That little blonde-headed gal that's on Kristen Chenoweth was there. I don't know if you know that, but
no, I didn't know that.
And it's funny too. A lot of people that didn't get hired there that ended up being big stars, but it's a shame to me that all that is not there, and it's gone. Doesn't matter. But
a big part of the community left when that was taken down. I mean, dancers, for example, that's where dancers worked in Nashville, and now I couldn't tell you where they work. So they left.
Drew, I think you know where some of them work.
Well, and I can't tell you where I work, but I dance.
Yes, you do.
All right, one thing I want to touch on is humor, because you mentioned at the Geo the difficulty in interacting in a room that holds 3,500 people. But man, as a drummer on Gary's gigs, that's the best part. It's not always what happens with the audience, but also on stage with the band. So it is humor natural for you, or is that something that you work at like a muscle? Man,
you know what, Drew? It's so funny, or maybe ironic, but I tell you, man, I don't really know. I mean, my brother and I were always cut ups at school, and we were always, you know, making people laugh. And I don't know where that came from. I will say I came from a crazy family, and I think most people that you know see that people see as humorous came from some kind of crazy family. But I don't know. It was just a way I always interacted with people. Now, one-on-one, like today, I can be overly serious and boring and drone on and on. But man, it seemed for some reason if there are 2 or 3 people excuse me, in the room. I don't know if it is this little anxiety or whatever, but I've always kind of related to crowds of people that way, and it's been something that I really took for granted for a long, long time. And then I realized that it was really, I couldn't understand, frankly, why I was still getting hired when all these other people I felt like were so much better singers and players. But I realized that what I was doing was, what I was bringing to the table was that, and being able to interact and kind of communicate with the crowd. Because sometimes the band would go and do stuff without me, and it would be great. But I think when I was with them, we would have some kind of rapport with the crowd that helped. But man, the funniest thing about all that was, like, I mean, we had the great girl singer, the great players, great, drummer, which, by the way, man, you were great. And you really were, and enjoy to work with, and he was never late again. But anyway.
No, I was once, actually.
Were you really?
I was late once to the Geo Theater, my second year there, one time, and you called me.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
What did I say?
One time I was late, and 2 years you called, and you're like, Drew, we can't have this.
Did I?
I think you were in a bad mood.
Had
nothing to do with me, but I laughed because it was like, this is not about me. I've never been late.
You've never been late. I don't remember. Late. I do remember. Do you remember? I think when you first got there, man. When you first got there, I don't know how this happened. You must have been doing some gigs with us or something, but we came up with this joke that we were like gonna, we had pretty cool.
We don't have to talk about that.
This is you know what, it really.
Oh,
but
man.
We had the pretty cool outfits. They weren't that bad. You never
knew.
They
were blue sparkle jackets.
Yeah, but it could have been worse. Kind of a, you can look at it 50-ish rock and roll, but
I didn't have to wear the jacket.
You didn't have to wear one because you're a drummer. So what we told Drew was, like, I got all this stuff somehow from somewhere. That was like, there was a blue sparkle bow tie, a blue sparkle cummerbund, and something that went around your wrists. And I said, man, look, since you're not wearing the jacket, they want you to wear this. Man, everybody was in on this but Drew. And I was like,
I was in on it, all right.
Ridiculous. Yeah. He's like, I am not wearing this, Gary. He's like, I am not wearing this outfit. Drew, I said, the costume people, they're all Broadway people. This is their idea. If you'll just do it for one show, man, and then we can explain to them that you can't play in this stuff. But if you don't give it a shot, man, so, and it was one of those jokes, man, where, oh man, we were laughing so hard. And I don't know, we called attention to it on the stage and all this stuff. But it was one of those jokes that it went on too long. So by the time we told you, it wasn't funny. I mean, it was like, we were thinking, we'd go, hey man, the whole thing's a joke. And you'd fall out. But at that point, you were just hurt.
That's when I quit.
I know. Oh, dude, was it you we played the thing on? No, it was John Foster. John Foster, after our show, and man, you can edit this out if you need to, but after John Foster, great guitar player, after our show, the name act would come in there, and generally we'd all clear out. Well, John had hung out one day and walked around the park, and he came back in there, and Sammy Kershaw's people were back there, and John ate some of their food or something.
At the Geo Theater.
Yeah, and the backstage Geo. So the next day I came in and and I was like, hey, you guys, listen, apparently one of our cast members ate some of Sammy's food last night, and so here's the deal: we're not going to be allowed to dress back here anymore or hang out here anymore. We're going to have to be about a quarter mile away in the rehearsal hall, and that's just the way it is. And man, and it was so funny. Everybody was just sitting there because everybody was in on it but John. And John, like, he totally like, hey man, it was me. And,
funnier yet, John ends up going to work for Sammy Kershaw.
Yep.
Yeah.
Played with him for years. But
that is so funny.
No, man, that was funny. And I tell you, it was amazing, the talented people that were out there. And it was a fun time and a great blessing. But I don't care what you do, man. If you do it 7 times a day, 3 times a day, it was a grind. And I would come home from that, and I was, I had studio gear, and I was determined, man, to keep writing and to keep playing my other stuff. Because when you worked at that theme park, you would lose your outside contacts and stuff. But I'd be so exhausted.
It was like touring. A lot of the guys that tour, they're like,
Yeah.
man, when I get back in town, I'm going to write and record and all that. And a lot of them don't. And they lose their connection in Nashville. Of course, 15 years ago, how many people had a cell phone? You know, well, not 15 years, 20 years ago.
No, you were out of touch. And I can remember coming home and trying to write, and I would fall asleep. I would, after being in that heat all day, and literally just every show you'd have to change shirts because you literally you would drink water all day and never go to the restroom, right? Because you went to the restroom in your clothes.
We were drenched after each show, and 3 shows like that. Very high energy, I might add.
Exactly.
Hey, I want to get to something that's very important to me. Gary did literally hundreds of school shows, has done thousands of corporate events, and then at some point in his career creates a character named Fat Elvis. And there will be pictures on Music City Social to give you examples of what I'm talking about. But how did that come about? Because that is a funny character.
Man, you know what? None of this was ever planned for me. Basically, I was broke and I needed the money. That's my stripper story. Why are and it's the same kind of thing. Here's the short story on that, as if there's any short story for me. Okay, this guy named Wayne Odom had been in this show where they were doing all these different costumed characters, and he was throwing away a bunch of costumes, and he was throwing away 2 Elvis suits. One of them was white, and it was all faded yellow and stuff. And the other one was black. And he's like, do you want these Elvis suits? And I was like, yes, I do. So I took that black Elvis suit home.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I had always been kind of clowning around. And this was right when, I was a huge Elvis fan. This is why I feel so guilty about this. Excuse me. And
but not guilty enough to stop. Hey,
let me tell you something. It's like stripping, You didn't plan on doing it this long, and you cry in the shower later in the fetal position, but, So I put the outfit on, and it was too big. So I took a pillow and stuffed it in the gut, and then a pillow and stuffed it in the butt section, and it looked like a fat Elvis, And this was right when all those books were coming out. Elvis died in 77. This is like 88. All those books were coming out. Even though he was iconic, there was a lot of comedians on TV. Jim Carrey, the guy from Taxi.
Andy Kaufman,
and all these people. It was just humorous to kind of make fun of those excesses in his life. So man, I was wearing this suit around, and I'd wear it in the office at the opera. Hey man, give me a jelly donut, man. Come on, I know you got a Delighted, man. Come on, man, I'm Jonesing, baby. Let's rock and roll. Let's party. Just kind of this out of control Elvis. Next thing I know, man, I'm going to hockey games, out ice skating out at the hockey game. I'm going to. I went into a lady's hospital room one time, and they just given her baby that she delivered, and I go in there and say, that's my baby, it's Elvis's baby, and just any kind of happy birthday to people. They give me $100, $200, and it was just the funniest thing, man. Well, the crazy thing is I came here to be like Steve Earle or John Mellencamp or somebody. And I'll never forget, man, this thing started taking on a life of its own, and I was out one night and being young, and I didn't get out too much back then. We were working all the time. I was standing with these other 2 guys, and somebody was trying to introduce us, and they were like, well, here's Drew. He plays drums for Lee Greenwood. Here's Bob. He works at Sony. And here's Gary. He's Fat Elvis, and it hit me, and I thought to myself, man, I got to quit doing this. So I just quit. I said, I'm not going to be Fat Elvis anymore. And then, but everywhere I'd go, people would talk about it, and people that would book our band would talk about it because it was funny and outrageous. And the way I did it was not mean-spirited, believe it or not. It was humorous. Hardly anyone ever expressed any offense. There were a couple of times. So I didn't do it for a long time, but I kept talking about it, and everybody wanted to hear these stories. And so in the meantime, I'd started going to Zanies, and because everybody was telling me, after the show, hey man, they'd say to the girl singer, Tabitha and Kim, you sing so well, and Drew, you play so well, and you know, John, you play the guitar so well. And they'd always say, Gary, you're funny. And I'd always heard in my life, you should be a comedian. You should be a comedian. So I started going to Zanies around like 90 or something like that. And I started seeing myself maybe more as maybe, I was just like, kind of like, man, what am I supposed to be doing? You know, what do I have to bring to the table? So I finally just said, when I thought of myself as a comedic entertainer, doing that Elvis thing didn't seem like such a bad deal. So I went and invested and got this huge sumo wrestler outfit and had this lady make a costume. And man, it's been on several TV shows and commercials and court TV. And man, I got to tell you something. I never, ever dreamed or desired, but I still do it. I mean, people will call me. I always tell the story. It's like, you know, back then it was like, you know, these agents would call me and they're like, hey man, can you come do Fat Elvis? I'm like, no, I'm a writer, man. I'm an artist. You know, I'm not doing this. I'm like, that's $500. And I'm like, where's the gig? Yeah. But it's, I've done it recently. I think I got a call the other day to do it again. And
you are an entertainer. I mean, that's how when people, man, you know, say or ask, what is Gary other than, you know, a friend and drug addict? Exactly. I always say Gary's an entertainer, which, I mean, really think about it. You're one of few people that I know of that has had a 20-plus year career in Nashville, and it's because of that you've done not only different types of gigs, but good example, you can do a corporate show, which you've done thousands of them at hotels for large corporations. You can go there, offer fantastic music. You play and sing well. You bring one of the best bands you can bring. You bring a comedy element. You interact with the crowd, and you can bring out a character like Fat Elvis. And that is a pitch for anybody listening to this that needs entertainment for their company. You bring it all. And so, of course, you would stay busy.
Well, thanks, man. You know, I mean, I tell you, honestly, most of it was just to do whatever, man, you know, we had to do. I mean, to get work. And but at this point, you know, I mean, I'm just thankful, man. I mean, and I mean, I've had to wear a bunch of different hats, but just to survive. A lot of people I know that have stayed busy in Nashville and not, you know, done anything else other than, I think it's, in my circles, rare to see somebody that just does one thing, you know, because, you know, you'll see a guy who's like, well, like, you know, that's writing songs and plays guitar for an artist and has a studio and, excuse me, does different things. But, man, I don't know. You know, I really, you know, whatever doors, I pounded on certain doors that never would open. And then the door next to it, which was not really where I wanted to go, would fling open, and they'd say, man, we love you just like you are, and here's some money. And I got to tell you something. People can say what they want, but man, the reality of you know, survival becomes a real issue. I mean, you can be, you know, romanticize a lot of ideas about like being the starving artist, but man, at some point you got no place to live, right? You know? I mean, you got to pay some bills, man.
Well,
you know?
And you've been self-employed much longer than I have. For me, 15 years roughly. But somebody said this to me the other day, and it's profound. If you're self-employed, remember this: all accounts come to an end, and that is a fact. There is no such thing as an account. You know, that you earn or make a sale on that lasts your career. It's you know. It's if it does, it's so rare. It's you know,
it's true, man. It's like, you know,
like Opryland. Did you think the park was going to close?
Man, I left that park in '94. I got to tell you, man, it was a great experience, and there's, you know, that book that's out where the guy talks about doing something 10,000 times to be great at it. I mean, man, there was just no better opportunity to go out there. You know, when you're tired, when you're sick, when you feel great, when it's hot, when it's cold, and do this thing over and over again. And then, but here was what was such a unique thing for me. I really wouldn't have fit into any other show, but man, we could tweak it. I didn't have to go to anyone and ask them to change something. If the second song wasn't working, we'd shorten it, or we'd go to this chorus, and was able to, you know, go out there and then do it in front of an audience again, which I've learned now, man, just like trying to, you know, keep my comedy thing happening, just being able to play in front of a crowd and go, and because you can write something, whether it's a song or anything, a bit, and it makes sense to you and then you go and do it in front of people, and you immediately know somehow there's some kind of honesty from that audience, like a jury almost, where you start realizing that what you're saying sounds stupid, or it started sounding phony right there, or this needs to be shortened, or they laughed right there. I didn't expect them to laugh right there. So it was a great thing. But I got to say, man, the point I was going to make is that, man, I got to tell you, man, I left in '94 because, I mean, man, it was a burnout thing. And you'd see and I tell you, man, I love people, especially when I was that age. It's like I'd sit there and talk to people sometimes until the next show started. But you could see the photos where you're smiling with your mouth, but your eyes are just dead, Yeah. And I tell you, man, there's some kind of balance with that. But now I tell you, and this has been said a million times, but that park was a unique place, and so was Libertyland. And Libertyland, I gotta say, man, was amazing, and more amazing in some ways because of the family atmosphere and the smallness of it. But man, both of those places that I was involved with, it's just heartbreaking that they're no longer there.
Yeah.
And Opryland, was a beautiful place, and it was just such a great memory for me as a kid, and then to get to work there and to be exposed to things. I mean, growing up in the semi-rural, not really. I mean, I was a small town kid, but we weren't exposed to some Broadway level shows, and some kids in there that would go to Broadway the next year. I mean, you're exposed to things that you just didn't see growing up in Florence, Alabama.
That's a good thing to bring up, is the talent that was out at the park. A lot of that talent worked with you over the years, probably still does.
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to bring up one person in particular, Shelley Wright.
Right.
Shelley used to drive around with you in your van and do school shows and stuff. There's been more than one example like that, but let's talk about her. What was that like? She had just moved to Nashville, and
Shelley was in the country show, and Kim and I had been doing the school shows, and man, those school shows were great. A guy named John Condit was a vendor in the park, and he was a coach at a school, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the town, Gordonsville, Tennessee, and he got the idea of put entertainment in schools. And he tried some different things, and eventually he and I met, and we went in there, and the kind of music we were doing and the kind of show we were doing came together. It was really working in those schools. And we eventually figured out that the best way to do it was me and a female singer and a small PA. And man, I'm telling you, we would get up anywhere from 3 a.m. to 5 in the morning, take off in that van, unload the PA, do a show, load it back up, drive somewhere else, unload the PA, do a show, and drive home. And I mean, it was like 6, 7, 8 hours of driving. It was grueling. We sometimes did 3 and 4 shows a day. But I got to tell you, man, I was so broke, man, and my family was just in disarray, which is, man, crazy. I mean, my mom was having all these health problems and stuff. And so, man, I went from having just almost hopeless to having a way to make money, and then man, eventually I really fell into this role, and it was really a turning point for me because I was writing and going down to Music Row, and all this whole thing of Music Row was, man, just hang out, you need to hang out more. You go to these writing sessions, no one would want to write, and everybody want to go drink, which, believe me, I've enjoyed a cocktail in my life, but it's like, man, you'd come home with nothing done and just having spent money. And I'd go to these schools, and you'd come home with money, and these kids were just wonderful. And it really kind of, I'd always worked around kids and kind of had a knack for it. One thing I figured out, I learned so much from going into these elementary, middle, and high schools with no poor lighting, any kind of situation it could be, and to entertain these kids. It was just like boot camp. But eventually, they were like, man, if you could have some kind of motivational message. And I was real uncomfortable with that at first because I just grew up fundamentalist, thinking that you had to be perfect before you said anything to anybody. But it became kind of natural because a lot of these kids in these rural communities, they didn't have any guidance counseling or anything. And I would talk to them about, setting goals and working hard. And I'd tell them different stories of friends of mine that were doing well. And it was just a real gratifying thing. I'm more proud of that than anything I've ever done. And it brought out the best part of me. And we ended up doing back then, the Just Say No thing was huge, and we got involved with DARE and that, and doing encouraging children, to not get involved in drugs and alcohol, and you can laugh because obviously I have drank a few drinks in my life, but I'm going to tell you something. I don't have any problem telling a kid not to do that, and it was a cool thing. Back to Shelly, Kim had grown tired of doing these shows, and she was mainly doing them with me. So I started auditioning people to do that, and I met Shelly, and we hit it off. She is just, man, it was funny on the first end of that. She was very opinionated about what her role would be, and I thought, man, okay. But once she got out there, she could see that we'd been doing it, and she kind of came my way on. She wanted to bring her piano at first, but she kind of came my way. And I got to tell you, man, she was just wonderful to work with. Great singer, incredibly beautiful, and just professional. And Shelly really knew how to handle people. And man, I mean, it was like maybe more than anyone I'd ever worked with, or maybe have. Just in any situation, she just knew what to say and do. And man, she was just great to work with. We laughed a lot. We were in that van together for a couple of years, several hours a day. And she was around. I mean, we really became close friends, and I just think the world of her, man. And of course, she went on to do really well. And her thing was just her country music career was just taking off, and I would drop her off at different places where she was hobnobbing with, the kind of Nashville elite, and she tried to include me in that, and I don't know, for some reason, man, I just never really did that. I don't know why. It's funny to me in a way. It's like she'd say, "Why don't you come to this thing?" And I'd be like, we'll go home. But anyway, I mean, she went on to have several records.
Yeah, big career.
Man, I think she had like 9 albums or something, and she had I know she had a #1 song that had the 2 gals I'd worked with, Kim and Tabitha, were in the video for that Single White Female. And
you're still in touch with Shelly?
I am on Facebook, and then we talked on the phone not too long ago because I've always fantasized about writing a book. And she wrote a book about her life, which I wanted. I was a little irritated that she didn't mention me in it, and then I was a little scared that she would. But it was a great thing, man. And she's doing well, and I know that she's got a huge fan base, and she's really happy. And I'm jealous that she gets to live in New York, but not this week because it's flooded. I just saw on Facebook she and her partner are helping a lot of people there, with supplies and things like that. Man, her story is amazing. She's a huge activist now for people who are I mean, I think basically her story, of course, was dealing with her sexuality in the country music world and growing up in small town Kansas. And it was just I had no idea when we were working together that she was going through that. And she's just doing well, and I think she's helping a lot of people, especially with the bullying and stuff like that in school. And she also created this program, and where she was reading rhythm and something in the school. She was like helping keep the arts alive in school and donating music and equipment and stuff like that. But she's just a annoyingly perfect person.
Wow.
She was like great to work with, and I miss her. I wish I could see her more.
All right, Gary, a lot of people, when they go to musiccitysocial.net, they're going to see pictures of you, and they're going to know, I've seen that guy on TV. Mm-hmm. He did the Regions commercial. He did this. He did that. And you've done a ton of that stuff, but you're working on a movie right now. Man, tell me about this, and why am I not in it?
Well, you know what, Drew? We can put you in this movie. are you willing? See, I was going to make some naked joke. I'm not even going to go there.
Well, and you know the answer. Yes.
Of course, because we're naked now. This is so weird. I don't understand why we have to be naked to do
we're
this
more
interview.
honest this way. Now answer the question.
I will, okay. Anyway, I just feel uncomfortable. Anyway, no, man, looking back on it, man, there were a lot of things I was interested in. I was interested in songwriting, performing. I'm one of those guys that loved playing any music, really. And then I got involved in comedy. And then when I started doing comedy, they were like, you should audition, take acting classes and audition. So I've auditioned for things. I got an agent here in Nashville, Talent Track. Been auditioning for things for a long time. And I've gotten over the years a handful of things, commercials and different roles and small things. But the biggest and coolest thing that I don't know what it is, if I'm just getting older and uglier and getting some more of these roles, but seems like I've been getting more stuff this year. And I got a role in a movie called The Song, and it's being produced by a company called City on a Hill Productions out of Louisville, Kentucky. And man, it is a very cool script about a guy who gets in the music business. Here's the short story. He has it all. He gets off track. He loses it all and comes back. And then I won't tell you how it ends. But my role in the movie is his sleazy manager, Stan the manager.
And you're perfect for that.
Drew, you or I, either one. And frankly, we joke around because, just being in the trenches of the entertainment business for so long, you develop this hard candy coating, and you've just dealt with so much cynicism and rejection that you kind of get this gallows sense of humor, and it's just been real easy to do this character. I did the audition, and the guy that wrote it, Richie, I can't think of his last name. He told me that the character he had written, Stan, was just kind of, he was like, he's a mean guy. But when I read the part, I think I brought an element of humor to it, kind of unintentional, but he would let us ad lib. The whole process of working on a movie has been so interesting to me and so different from what I've been involved in. But the way Richie approaches it, he has his script, but he leaves us some opportunity to ad lib,
which is good for you.
Man,
that
really
is your strength.
I have over the years developed the ability to memorize a lot of text, and I've surprised myself under pressure about being able to do that, because it's something I never thought I could do. But I guess if you have to do it, you'll do it. But man, it's like it just has been a wonderful experience, and I was hoping, I've seen some of the footage, and man, these guys are totally pro. The camera guys, the lighting guys, and of course it's all shot on high def video, but it looks just like film, which is amazing. And the people that are the leads in the guy that's the lead is a guy named Alan Powell, who's just wonderful, man. This young man has it all, man. He is a good looking, talented young man, and the gals that are in it, one plays his wife, Rose, and the other one that plays Shelby, the kind of the naughty girl that goes on tour with him, and kind of and it's just like so many things in it I've just seen in my life, and how the guy starts to get off track. But I was just watching the footage the other night in the trailer after we'd shot, and their scenes were so amazing. I was just dreading seeing myself, and there I was, which I must say, man, everybody was saying, oh, we love it, but I still cannot get used to looking at myself or hearing myself. And the camera does add 10 pounds. Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's why this is an audio program.
I know. We look great on this program, but man, it's been fun, and I'm thrilled to be involved in that. I've done another thing this summer called The Board with a guy named Jim Shea. And this is being pitched as a TV pilot, and it's a kind of a Cheers type show set in an Italian restaurant called Savarino's Cucina that's down behind West End. So that kind of, it's weird, man. I was listening to the podcast you did the other day with Steve Mandel, and man, I really enjoyed that. But Steve said something that I thought just was profound. He said, man, you should always go and play, go do anything. And I think, man, that's a mistake I made, because when we were really doing a lot of those, just really covered up with corporate stuff, I wouldn't go do certain things, you know, and I'll tell you, man, from doing that thing on the board, which was the thing that Jim did, is what opened the door to getting this other thing. And man, I'm just enjoying, you know, I mean, you know, I keep thinking, well, what is it I do? I mean, well, we've got band gigs coming up for corporate events. I'm doing an MC gig. You know, when the guys ask me on the MC thing, we're not looking for a lot of humor here. And I'm like, well, I can deliver not being funny. But, which is ironic. The harder I try to be funny, the less funny I am. The harder you try to not be funny, I'm hilarious at a funeral. You should see me do a eulogy, which I've done. But man, you know, in this acting stuff, I'm just, you know, kind of open to, you know, whatever, but it's all kind of the same stuff. I think it's generally, you know, connecting with people and telling a story, and, you know, and but man, at this point, we're, you know, selling the comedy thing, the MC thing, the band thing, and the acting thing, and I get a lot of calls for people who'll say, man, we got a weird idea. Like, I got a call a few years ago.
I'm your man.
I'm your guy. I'm the guy under weird. Like, I dressed up as a Sherpa. You know, I had to look up what a Sherpa was. That's the guy the people that help you get to the top of Mount Everest.
Yes.
So I'm dressed as a Sherpa on a fake snowy mountain, you know, at one event. And man, I've been all kinds of things. I remember one time I was dressed as a Canadian Mountie, and I can't remember what that was for, but I got pulled over on the way to the gig, which was funny.
Did you get out of your ticket?
Man, it was so funny. The cop busted out laughing when I got out of the thing. I did get out of the ticket, and I got hired to dress up as this was for a favor for one of my friends that works at an agency here in town. I think I'm going to be Cupid on Valentine's
We need pictures
Day,
of that, please.
Yeah,
send
man.
photos.
But you know, I tell you what, it's funny. I was telling this young fellow the other day, you know, who was in town, you know, trying to get it going. I remember when I came up here, I was so shocked and thrilled that I was getting to be involved in the entertainment business, and I really, it's embarrassing to admit, but like around, you know, when all that started, I think my ego, I look back and I had a perm in my hair, and I had an earring, you know, and then I had all these, like, this crazy jacket with all these pins from all the places I'd been. I want to go back in time and just punch myself. I don't think I was totally annoying, but I really was kind of running a lot on ego. And I thought, man, I really just thought, man, I thought, man, I want to be, you know, I really didn't, I think I wanted to be famous, and I wanted people to, you know, especially, you know, the people that from, you know, maybe the girl that wouldn't talk to you in high school to think you were cool. But I realized pretty quick that was a stupid reason to be doing stuff, because let me tell you, people aren't thinking about you for very long. They're like, hey man, that's what you're going to do. You know, good luck and with your health insurance. But eventually I just decided, man, the best reason to do this is to help people have fun. And it's a service, you know, to where people go, man, we're having this meeting and it's kind of a lot of stuff, or it's maybe boring, and we just, man, can we have you in to help us have fun? And whether it's, you know, providing music or comedy or, you know, and I love that, because man, I would hate to have a job where I was, you know, foreclosing on people or firing people, or, you know, I mean, it's just really been great. I've had other friends that have told me about things in their jobs where, you know, where they're having to do these horrible things. And I've enjoyed that. And that's the way I look at it now. It's like, man, whatever I can do to help someone with their event, you know, have fun. And that's cool. And I'm really thankful and shocked that I have been allowed to do this. I'll tell you one time, man, when I remember, I think after you and me had not been working together for a while, and you came out and did a show with us, and see, I get caught up there, you know, one of my buddies was like, oh man, you got it made. he came to one of our shows and we were rehearsing. We've done, and I'm bragging here, but I want to tell anybody who's listening that we play for probably every major corporation there is in America.
Definitely.
We did Harley Davidson National Convention for several years, and my buddy was over when we were rehearsing for that. He's like, "Man, you got it made, you know." But I told him, I said, so much of what I do and some is administrative. I mean, it's sitting in an office doing contracts, negotiation, conference calls, things like that, learning material and stuff like that. The most fun part of it is getting to go play. I mean, but that's like anybody will tell you, you know, that's a small part. But I do remember one time we were out there at the hotel and you were with me.
Was it Denver?
No, this was at the Opryland Hotel.
Oh, okay.
And Kirk Eberhard and me and you and some other guys, we were riding around in the car, man, and we had this megaphone. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
And we had this machine that made sounds.
Right.
You know, and I brought that with me today for our interview.
You can, yeah,
and,
great.
And so what we were doing, we laughed like, this is the machine. I'm gonna. You can edit this. And you see, I know, Drew, that is not highbrow humor. But you got to admit, whoever made this machine,
genius.
varied, different. Excuse me. Oh man. Anyway, so I had this thing in the car. And we were riding around the outside of the Opryland Hotel with that megaphone. Remember that? And we had the mic up to the megaphone, and we were riding up to where all these people were pulling up to this like swanky hotel, unloading their stuff, and we're shooting this fart sound out. And man, I swear to you, I don't know when we've laughed.
We were crying.
So, like 9th grade kids, man.
Yeah,
just
we were crying.
I mean,
sadly, it wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't that long ago. Oh,
anyway,
funny.
man.
All right, Gary, I got one more question for you, and I think you're the perfect guy to answer this. Let's say you just moved to Nashville.
Okay.
Okay, because a lot of people are moving here. They want to be singers, songwriters, entertainers.
Sorry.
What is your first move?
Get a fart machine.
You other than
Number
that,
one.
and a megaphone, and drive around the hotel. But what is your first move to find work? Because you mentioned what I think is the best tip so far on the show. You were doing gigs around Vanderbilt, making a few $100 a night.
That was unusual,
you know?
man. That
So,
was.
What would you do?
Well,
you moved here today.
Okay, let me ask you this, and I love that question, and it reminds me of that. You know, the guy that does the actors interview. You know that gentleman on TV. He always asks that question at the end, like, "What's your favorite curse word?" Man, I think to answer that question, you have to. I mean, and I think Steve said this. It's like, what is it that you want to do that would determine, you know, what steps you would take. Now, and I'm not trying to get out of giving you the simple answer. Let me say the simple answer would be, and I think this goes for anything, it's a business. This life is a business of relationships. And I think that anyone you can meet in any way, shape, or form that has anything to do with what you want to do, you need to go and meet them. And of course, you know, if you want to be a sound engineer, or if you want to be a songwriter, or if you want to be a comedian or an actor, which I wouldn't suggest, frankly, moving here for an acting career. I think there are probably other cities that would be certainly better for that. But I think, you know, getting out there and being around people, I mean, just trying to keep it simple, just a couple of things that I think are super important. And this is something I remember reading in a book that Kenny Rogers wrote, and he was talking about, man, it's important to be great at what you do, but if you're not fun to be around and a pleasant person to be, you don't have to be fun, the life of the party, but if you're not a pleasant person to be around, man, you know, it's like he said, I'd rather have a really good guitar player who's fun, cool to be around, than to have a great guitar player who's a jerk. You know, I'll tell you one thing too, man, is returning phone calls, texts, and emails. It's a different world now than where we were, you know, when we moved here. You
Definitely.
know, I mean, you've got with the social media and all that stuff, it's you know, that changes the whole ball game. But but I would say almost for sure. And I was telling Drew about this Bob Lefsett's newsletter that's really interesting that I've read a lot, where, you know, he has been a proponent of sometimes not moving to a music industry, because there was a debate on there, like a music industry city, because you know, like there were these people that were talking about moving to San Francisco to start a career in a creative career, and how difficult it was to live there. You don't necessarily have to move to a music center, but I think it's a lot better if you do. Your chances are going to go up way higher. And I know I'm babbling on, but I'd say if you move to Nashville to keep your expenses down and to network, you know, and this is assuming that you have ability and that you're working on your craft and all that stuff. But I got to tell you, man, I mean, when I look back on my life, I mean, I think because I started school really young, and I was a lot younger and smaller than the other kids, I learned to get along with people, and I was always nice to people and respectful to people. And man, I'm just so thankful now, because I run into people that I might have known 20 years ago, and you don't think about, like, when you're in college, you know, if you might have mistreated someone or you know, or whatever, that person, you know, it's just important, I think, to build relationships with people. And if people go, man, Drew's a great guy, and he's also a great drummer. There's a bunch of good drummers here, but if you're a great guy, yeah, and then they have your number. One thing I've found out is I continue to learn things in this business and life, but when I was out there for years going to work every day at Opryland, I was around all the agents and stuff. But man, I'll tell you, for me now, it's important for me to call on these agents and to just let people know in a non-obtrusive way, excuse me, that you want to work, that you're ready to work, and letting them know that you want to work. But I tell you, man, if you're good at what you do, and you are a pleasant person to be around, and you make yourself available and let people know you want to work, eventually I think you will have success. And you know, that's kind of what I would say. And that's a long answer to that question, but it's really, let me just sum it up. If you're good at what you do, and you're pleasant to be around, and you let people know, you know, that you want to be there and help them, you know, in whatever their situation is, then I think that you can stay busy, man.
Gary Jenkins.
Thank you very much.
Gary, thank you for being on the show.
Drew, thank you. I love you, man.
I love you too. In addition to providing music and comedy for corporations around the globe, you can see Gary perform his stand-up routine at comedy clubs everywhere. Learn more about Gary Jenkins by visiting our website at musiccitysocial.net.
Music City Social is produced by Star Maker PR Group, providing publicity and public relations services to the entertainment industry. Learn more at starmakerpr.com. Promotional consideration provided by Super Rope Cinch. Secure anything with rope without ever tying or untying a knot. Learn more at superropecinch.com.